On 3, 2, 1. Right. Now, I sometimes come to the end of the week. This isn't the end of the week because I've got another lecture this evening, but sometimes when I come to the end of a series of seminars in the week, i.e. this is the end of this subject this week, I either think that this is something that I enjoyed doing or was something I didn't enjoy doing. But today we're going to be looking at a subject that I feel that you'll all get something out of, and at times it's slightly controversial. And I would like to start off by looking at this skull. Now, what we do find is that the remains of Peking man. Peking is the old name for Beijing, and the precise place that the finds at Peking were made is a location known as Chao Kadan Cave Complex. And if I mention the finding at Peking or Beijing at Chao Kadan, it's all the same locality today. So last week we were looking at the Aboriginal people of Australia, and there is a lot to be said about that lecture and this lecture that has got parallels. And on Monday, I put together the thought and statement that you need to look at the findings at Peking and the findings in Australia in one jacket. And if we put it in one jacket, you can now think of 5 routes for the origins of modern day humanity. And there's one route that I prefer, but I'm not going to tell you which one that is, but you'll probably work that out. So there's the established since 1960 that we all came out of Africa. And to be honest with you, in this day and age, coming out of Africa fits one certain group's protesting political ideologies. And I'm not going to spell that out anymore. So that's the one channel that we all evolved out of Africa. The other channel is that there's a multi-regional channel of evolution. So modern day hominids on this planet, the cosmopolitan hominids on this planet, have seen a multicultural, multi-regional evolution. So the multi-regional evolution would say that we've got out of Africa and out of China and out of somewhere else. Now, the problem is, as we shall find, is that we haven't excavated every single cave on this planet. We haven't been to every location. And the places, and this is fact, it's a really interesting fact now. The places that people went to find ancient human remains are the places that they found them. And what I mean by that is when they went to the Olduvai Gorge, Rift Valley, Tanzania, Africa, from the 1920s all the way into the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, work still going on there by the Leakey family. They eventually found human remains that date back millions of years. When they went searching on the island of Java for human remains in the late 1800s, guess what they found? Human remains. When they actually looked at the Chao Kadan Cave complex in China, guess what they found? Human remains that date back hundreds of thousands of years ago. If they started doing the same level of investigations at caves in Tibet, Mongolia, Nepal, anywhere really, they will probably come up with human remains that hundreds of thousands of years old. And I remember listening to a radio play with Sir David Attenborough recently, and when he went to Tibet and Nepal and he studied that area, there was talk of the abominable snowman, otherwise known in other parts of the world as the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and so on. And then he actually started seeing evidence of this thing, this creature. And then away from that, if he had have had the scientists going into the caves, they would have probably found evidence that, in fact, what the sightings of that being that they were finding actually have evolved from some kind of hominid. And and then you've got three other channels. So you've got the one channel which is multi-regional. So you've got the Africa bit, but you've got that there's evolution, prime evolution, that comes out of Australia into China. That's the other route. And the other route is that we've got out of China into Aboriginal Australia. Remember, the work in Australia is really new, right? So where they've been working in Java, they found Homo erectus, and that work goes back to the 1880s. You only start to look at the Aboriginals in the 1980s. So the research is 100 years behind in Australia, right? Or you've got the fifth theory, out of China. Now that's a really interesting one. We've all evolved out of China. Now I would say, why not? That's not exactly that. I'm not saying that that's the one I deeply believe. Maybe one of the other ones is the one that I believe, but out of China. Because if the Leakeys hadn't have started work or hadn't have worked in the Olduvai Gorge at all, the oldest human remains on this planet would be in China. So in other words, we would today be talking about out of China. And half of the problems that we're getting at this minute with all these protests wouldn't be happening, because the Chinese would be saying we've all evolved from China, right? So, you know, this is a fascinating subject, but we've only got 1% of the picture. Unless we've investigated all the caves on this planet, we will never really know what's going on. And another statement I'd like to make. Last week, I made a statement that most of the intact human remains discovered on this planet beyond 40,000 years ago, most of them come from Australia. So in other words, we've got more burials, more cremative evidence in Australia beyond 40,000 years ago than anywhere else on the planet. That's a bold statement to make. What does that mean? Well, actually, it's the same as what I'm going to go on to now. Because when Eugene Dubois excavated on the island of Java in 1887, he found some of the remains of Homo erectus that would become known as Homo erectus. And then we look at the Peking site from the 1920s onwards. And when we look at the Peking site from the 1920s onwards, when we look at the Peking site, if you put all those findings together of Homo erectus and the Peking Homo erectuses together, more Homo erectusines are being found in that area in Asia than anywhere else on the planet. Again, more Homo erectus samples are being found in that area than anywhere else on the planet. Surely, now this is going to put a bit of bias in there. Surely if we've evolved from Africa, we would find more Homo erectus remains in Africa, because the Homo erectus is a direct ancestor of us today. Now, the other thing that must be said is that I feel very much that we have got living today many different levels of hominids, and they are all classed as humans. We're all humans on this planet. We're all, in other words, one race. We may have come from different avenues, but because of the all intermingling and the cosmopolitan nature of humanity, we've all come into one strand, right? So we're all sort of classed as humanity, but we've all come there via different routes. Probably around 2 million years ago, there were probably up to 50 different types of hominids on this planet. And over time, they've interbred, they've evolved, they've gone this way and all the rest of it, right? And they've come together as being this type of humanity, right? That's what we're talking about. And then what I said, if you look at the African elephant, and you look at the Sumatran elephant, and you look at the Indian elephant, and you think about the dwarf elephants of Borneo, and I think there's probably one other place that you get elephants on the planet. If you put them all together and they started interbreeding, you'd have one species of elephant. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about today. So when anyone lectures me, and they still do, and they say Neanderthals became extinct, they definitely 100% became extinct, right? And then you think, well, hang on a minute, over the past 10 years, we found out that Homo sapien Neanderthals were more intelligent than us, but they still become extinct. Homo sapien Neanderthals made better art than us contemporaneously, but they become extinct. They were able to speak, but they became extinct. They were better hunters than us, and they became extinct. They were better runners than us, that became extinct. They had fires before, and you start to think, but they became extinct. And you start to think this is absolute, mind my French, crap. I don't believe that Homo sapien Neanderthals became extinct at all. I think as a matter of interbreeding and a great cosmopolitan evolution that we see today, right? So what I'd like to do is, here we go. This is a cave. This is the upper cave network. The upper finds made at Peking were made in this site. But for the sake of argument, sort of squint your eyes and believe today that this is actually a cave on Java, the island of Java, right? So, so the reason why I want to look at Java is because this leads us into these guys, right? So these guys, the Chinese are very much. This is what a Homo erectus looked like from the reconstructions, right? And he looks very similar to people who wander down the street in my steg today, backwards and and no, oh Barry, no, actually, definitely not backwards and definitely not ugly. So that means I'm saying that people in my steg are beautiful. So the earliest finds of Homo erectus, upright man, were made in the central region of Java, known as Trinil, by a Dutch doctor known as Eugene Dubois, who, now this is interesting, right? He was a Dutch doctor in Java, and he was interested in evolution, right? He was interested in fossils. He was interested in our direct ancestors. Dubois is in Java in the 1880s, just a few years after Charles Darwin's theory of evolution was published. Few years after. But this guy believes that on the island that he's got a job, that he's going to find in the caves the origins of humanity, right? Nobody was thinking of this with Africa. Now, I've got a little story to add to this. When I was back in 1993, when I was managing an archaeological project, yeah, I was only 18, but anyway, 1993, I was in Cyprus, and there was this bloke, and this bloke come up to me. He was a local guy. He said, "Look, you're archaeologists. When I was a child, I found these really big teeth, right? These really big teeth. They look like human teeth in a cave near here." And I just thought, wow, that's amazing. But I didn't investigate the cave. I was too interested in finding Roman pottery than I was in investigating this cave. Now, if I had spent the project then investigating the cave, right, I may have found teeth that belong to Homo sapien Neanderthal, teeth that belong to Homo erectus, and so on and so on, but I didn't do it. But I was in Cyprus, and exactly the same thing is as this is. Somebody's got some time off and they decide to investigate caves. Lo and behold, they find Homo erectus. Now, where does this chap, he's actually quite an interesting looking chap, and he's got Native American features. You know, if this guy's chasing you down the street, right, Native American definitely. He's got those sort of features. It looks like it to me anyway. And what we talk about evolution, we've got Australopithecines 4 million years ago in Australopithecines in Africa. I've always wondered why that was. Anyway, in Africa, so we got Australopithecines, and then we got Homo habilis, and then we've got Homo habilis is about 2.5 million years ago. Homo habilis is an ape-like creature that climbs down from the trees, is sort of bipedal, that spends most of his time on all fours, right? But we feel that he had tools, and he feel that they lived in communities in caves occasionally when we're down from the trees and so on, right? A vague description of what Homo habilis is. Lots of hair and so on. And then what we do find, the hair bit, we'll do that in a minute. What we do find is then we've got Homo erectus, so about 1.8 million years ago. All these dates could change any moment. And then somewhere around 800,000 years before present, we've got Heidelbergensis, and then we've got somewhere along the line, we've got Homo sapiens, and then we got Homo sapien Neanderthals leaving Africa in different waves, Denisovians, people from the island of Flores, and it goes on and on and on and on. So that's, but in other words, we don't know Jack, really. We don't really know human evolution. And then when you get a Jehovah's Witness knocking on your door, they can get you, they can get you in knots.
Oh, they're confusing. Half of my family are Jehovah's Witnesses, and they believe that no one existed after 30,000 years ago. Like,
yes,
which makes no sense really with the evidence.
It makes no sense, but the thing is, they can get you in 6s and 7s. And the reason why they can get you in 6s and 7s, because as an archaeologist, I can't give them a direct answer, but they can give us a direct answer naturally. So that's what I was trying to say, get at, Jessica. So we've got all that with sort of evolution. Anyway, back, and the other thing as well is hair. Right now, there's lots of this thing about human hair, right? The reason why we don't have much hair on our bodies, right, is because we wear clothing. Well, strangely enough, in the pubic area of human beings, we've got hair, and surely that would be an area that we would lose our hair first, and we haven't. We've got hair under our armpits, right? Surely we would have lost our hair there. Anne's got hairs on her breast, you know, and so has Henry. We haven't lost those hairs, right? And lots of people wear hats. We've worn hats throughout history. Why haven't we lost hair? And the thing is, the answer why we've lost our hair throughout history hasn't been answered. There's so many questions that we don't really have answers to. But if you want a straightforward lecture, you're not going to get it. So here we go, working from 1887 onwards in a hospital in the Dutch colony of Indonesia, Dubois spent his spare time searching caves. After making his first discovery, again, 1887, now put that into perspective, we don't really have Lucy until the late 1950s, 1960s in the Old Avai Gorge, right? We've got the Latolai footprints before that, and in the 1950s. But up until that point, nothing's really been found anywhere. But this guy finds these caves and an area outside the caves, And after making his first discovery in 1887, the first discovery was made by quarry workers near these caves, right in Trinil. And then he opened his own excavation in the river gravels, which in the summer months, they were dry. So he excavated in those areas. In 1890, 1892, he had the good fortune, here we go, because he persevered. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Good fortune to find what he was seeking: a skull cap, a femur, and 2 molars, and he described it as the true missing link. So basically what he's done, he's taken Charles Darwin at gospel, right? And he's basically said, how do you go from apes to us today? And then he's found the bit in the middle, Homo erectus, apparently. In 1894, he formally announced the discovery of Pithecanthropus, which basically means ape man, or Pithecanthropus erectus. And what do we call this individual today? Homo erectus. Or if you're looking in the likes of Peking, Homo erectus pekinensis. Oh, well, actually, there's Homo erectus. It's basically the same as saying Caucasoid, Afro-Caribbean, all that type of stuff. We're all human beings at the end of the day. So this itself is an amazing thing that he actually realized this. And if we want to go back to 1894 when he's announcing this, so nearly 130 years later, this guy, we still use what this guy has told us, right? So anyway, so this site itself, Zuccotin ancient site, and what we find is that the Chinese have done a brilliant job. When you look around the cave network here, right? What happens? There's a light show on the walls, and this light show tells you where different things are being found, which is great. They don't use labels, and the one good thing about this is if, for example, a discovery is made and the dates are wrong, or this artifact is something else, the Chinese can just update their software and then project this on the wall, and this is what was actually found here, right? I love that. But what I don't like is, for example, I'll give you a really good example. What I don't like is, like we have had the conversation with Bill at the beginning about Owen Glyndŵr. If, for example, Owen Glyndŵr died in 1405, it'll probably take another 50 years for all the information about Owen Glyndŵr to be updated. And even then, people will resist the fact that Owen Glyndŵr died in 1405. It's what I believe, okay? But even if I proved it categorically, I spent the rest of my life proving that as a fact, with all the evidence, it still wouldn't change the history books. It would take decades for history books to change. But the Chinese are quite open to change, which is great. So this site itself, the Zuccotin site itself, is very near the, actually the pronunciation is Chakaten, I got Zuccotin, Chakaten ancient site. And this is Chakaten city, which is just a stone throw away from Peking. That's why we call it Peking. And there it is. Now, somebody asked me today, they said, Carl, are you ever going to do a lecture on the early human origins in Japan? And I shivered because I thought, oh, great, no. Because I've got a lecture on Yamon culture in Japan dating back 2,000 years ago, which I can do. I can do that. It's fine. I'm okay with that. But I said no, and then I backtracked and I thought this would be really interesting, because the Japanese would surely be like the Aboriginal Australians. It's a bloody island, for God's sake. And you know, and then I'm reminded, and I think this is right. I'm not sure this is right, but I'm going to spit out. I'm quite sure that they found Homo erectus remains in Japan, but I'm gonna look that one up. I'm pretty sure they have. So what we've got is lots of casts of skulls. Everybody, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go get another glass of water. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to, there we go. This next bit of the lecture, right, seminar, as I'm told I've got to call them now, that is a German archaeologist, which makes things very interesting. And this is at the time that the Germans are in power, that the Nazis are in power in Germany. But this guy is very, very different. This guy, Franz Veidenreich, is a very different thinker. And his thinking is still used today. Whereas the Ahnenerbe in Nazi Germany, their thinking was dismissed years ago. Well, most of it. Anyway, I'll be back now. I love my little goats. I love my little goats. Bill, don't talk about the cricket.
Hello, everybody. I'm here.
My baby goats.
I found something on the front. I found something on the front of my computer that I can press and find out where I am. That's okay.
Right, okay. Right, so here we go. We could listen to American Pie, that's on here as well. Right, now this is where the lecture gets even more interesting. So, there's a great little piece this. I've actually got, reminder, I've got the rest of this to do, I've got that to do. So, now actually on Tuesday, I tried out another lecture style. And the lecture style was I divided the whole thing into acting scenes. So basically we've got act 1 where we've got discoveries in Java, and then another actor comes on the stage, and you've got act 2 and you've got all these individuals coming on. It worked actually pretty well. And I might actually do a bit of that here as well. So what we're looking at this Peking site, we're now really into this Peking site. So the work at the Peking site takes place between 1921, 1941, and there has been modern work there since the 1960s. So Homo erectus, so the archaeology at this site takes us back 750,000 years ago to 750,000 years ago. The Java find takes us back to 1.8 million years ago. So this find 750,000 years ago. What we see with the Java find in this site is that it's almost as if the Homo erectusines, which we'll call them, abandoned both sites at the same time, which is quite strange because there's quite some distance between the two sites. And it might be lots of reasons why these sites, these Homo erectusines disappeared. But there's 2 points that I sort of mentioned. Maybe these people were starting to evolve into different types of hominids. Maybe they moved away. Maybe the evidence of both sites was destroyed by some glaciation. Other people say that the people coming out of Africa went all the way to China and the island of Java, and the same thing could be said with Australia. They went all the way over there, massacred the Homo erectusines, right? And that's how you got modern human beings, right? Absolute nonsense. Chuck it out the window. Rubbish, right? Because this isn't people. This is the thing. This is the real negative side of this out of Africa theory. What they say is that a group of humans came out of Africa. Homo erectusines, and then you've got Homo sapiens, and you've got Homo sapien Neanderthals. And what they give the impression that these Homo sapiens and Homo sapien Neanderthals went around Asia and Africa, wiping out every single last Homo erectus, right? And then what happens is then you get out of Africa, Homo sapiens sapiens, and they go out and chase Homo sapiens and they kill them all. And Homo sapien Neanderthals, they knew where they all were and they wiped them all out. Again, absolute nonsense. And the other thing as well is, with all these theories coming out of Africa, is why did people travel all those distances anyway? Their lives weren't that long, right? Lots of these people, lots of these types of hominids lasted 20 years. And the best that they can do is keep their family group going and actually feed themselves. They don't need to travel all these vast distances. So maybe a multi-regional model is the way to go. So what we've got discoveries being made in the 1920s, but we don't have any sets of human remains until the late 1920s, 1929. Between 1929 and 1937, a total of 40 sets of human remains, Homo erectus remains, were found. And then you can have an argument with me, what is humanity? This is humanity. Any evolutionary links is humanity, right? Between 1929 and 1937 specifically, they come up with 15 sets of skulls, crania, right, without the lower mandibles. And they found 11 sets of mandibles, and many teeth, many sets of many of the humerus, many of the femurs, many of the long bones, and that represented up to 40 individuals. Now, the reason why this is a bit of a stage performance is because we hear about the Canadian archaeologist, well, paleoanthropologist or paleontologist. Let's call them these experts because there's different categories for them. Davidson Black. He was one of the major figures at this Peking site until his death in 1935. 1935, he was Canadian. And then comes in Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He's a French archaeologist. So he works there until he's replaced by a German archaeologist in 1937 known as Franz Veidenreich. And then he was there until 1941. Now, I've got to jump to Veidenreich's defense straight away. He was not an SS Ahnenerbe archaeologist. He was an archaeologist. He was an archaeologist who was not going after seeking for the origins of the pure race, the pure Aryan race. Lots of archaeologists, put it this way, if I'd have been in Germany in 1935, I would have probably been an Ahnenerbe archaeologist, and I would have been out there seeking for the remains of the pure Aryan race. And they said that the pure Aryan race developed around 10,000 years ago, and blah, 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 right? Weirdly enough, we find all those remains in Orkney in the north, and that's whatever. But anyway, the long story short is that this Veidenreich didn't buy into that. He bought into something else. And his theories have come all the way down to today. And to be honest with you, he's probably like I am now. I'm open to persuasion and I'm open to looking at the evidence. And that's where I am now. Not an Ahnenerbe archaeologist that I would have been in the 1930s. So we're going to make that clear. Now, this is, it's 1921. Act number 1. Curtains go up. Swedish geologist Johan Gunnar Andersson enters the stage, and interestingly enough, he enters the stage where Dubois enters the stage in Java in 1887. Andersson, you couldn't have an even better Swedish name even if you tried, was with an American paleontologist, Walter Granger, typical American academic. And they head to China in search of prehistoric fossils. Now, I've got to ask you, if they would have headed to Siberia, would they have come up with the same results? Or if they had headed to Japan, would they come up with the same results? And I would hand on heart say probably yes, right? But they happened to go to Chochedin, the Peking site. Now, in 1921, massively, they were convinced that there was something at this site because local quarrymen, there's a bloody record in this, isn't there? The quarrymen, 1950s, I know it well. The local quarrymen said to these two, there's a place known as Dragon Bone Cave. And why is it called Dragon Bone Cave? Because large bones have been found there and large teeth. So Anderson, being a geologist, recognized that some of the deposits in the cave were not of the cave. Looking back on this, it was a limestone cave and they found huge, massive deposits of quartz, but these were not quartz from that locality. These are quartz from elsewhere. So they almost been brought in. So immediately realizing the importance of this find, he announces to his audience, "Here is primitive man. Now all we have to do is find him." Oh, actually, the theatre next door, the Leakeys, are saying the same. "We have found axes in Africa. Here is primitive man. Now all we have to do is find him." Do you see why we've got a problem, folks? It's whenever you look, you find things. Basically, it's like having a relationship, right? You know, I've got this wonderful, loving relationship with Bill. We've always found faults with each other, but we love each other in the end, right? When we look for faults, we will find them, right? My faults is that I'm late all the time. Bill's faults is he can be bloody annoying when he wants to be. But the point is, what I'm trying to do is a metaphor. I'm trying to say, when you go out looking for things, you find them, right? Now, if I want to, on the reverse, I can say that if I look into Anne's heart, I see she's a wonderful lady. And if I look at Jessica, she's a wonderful lady, right? Back at you, Jessica. But what I'm trying to say is that when you look for things, you're going to find them. And it's the same. If you want to find Roman evidence in the top end of Scotland, you will find it if you put millions of pounds into finding it. If you want to find more Roman villas, and Bill knows what I'm talking about, if you want to find more Roman villas in Cornwall, right, you will find them. So back to the rest of the lecture. You can imagine these experts excavating in front of you. They're excavating. And in comes onto the stage, wait for it, an Austrian paleontologist. Now, you don't get many Austrians in these lectures, but an Austrian paleontologist. And guess what his name is? Otto. You can't make it up. Otto Zansky, who found what appeared to be a fossilized human molar. Now, I think this is 1922, actually. And then they all returned to the site in 1923. And materials excavated in the two subsequent digs were sent to Uppsala University in Sweden for analysis. Now, this is key to the story. And the reason why this is key to the story is because this is where the teeth were sent. And actually, let's show you one of these teeth. Bingo, that's a tooth. That's not any normal tooth. That is a Homo erectus tooth from the excavated site. Now, 4 teeth survived. Haven't I already said that they found the remains of 40 bodies before 1937? But we're building up to that. We've got a commercial break coming. So they excavated there and they had found 1 tooth, and now they'd found another 2 teeth in 1926. Now, this type of archaeology is really intense because you're excavating and you're not finding anything, Now, in my lecture today in Lantup Major, it could be argued that those teeth have ended up in the cave because they've been moved there by glaciation. They're the only things that are going to survive from a human body have moved there in via glaciation. That's what they think about the teeth that have been found in the Pont Newydd cave in North Wales from Homo sapien Neanderthals. However, and then how many nationalities have we got so far? We've got a Dutchman, we've got a Swedish man, we've got an American, we've got Austrians, And now we've got the Canadians. The anatomist Davidson Black of Peking Union Medical College was excited in the nether regions by Anderson's and Zadinsky's finds, that Austrian. Secured funding from the Rockefeller Foundation. Now you bring in the Americans as well, again, and recommended excavations at the 1927 site. And guess what? Now, this is when things change, right? Now, I've mentioned a lot about, I know some of you are really interested in this, the equality between, male and female archaeologists working. And if you get female and male archaeologists working together, you can probably get a more balanced overview of history. So when you get male archaeologists working, it's usually about war. And when you female archaeologists working, you usually get a different perspective. On a different level altogether, there's no female archaeologists working on this site, but what there are Chinese archaeologists. Now that's really important. They've got the Chinese element in there. So from very early on, native archaeologists are working there. The Chinese are working there. That's really, really important. Really important because you've got a Chinese perspective. But there is one other little bit of bias. Nobody is doing this type of work other than the Leakeys in Africa. And to be honest with you, they really haven't found much, right? So, and it's unlikely that the Leakeys have got local personnel in and they're not probably going to be interested or whatever. But bad statements to say that they might not be interested or whatever, but Africa's still a colonial landscape. So they're not going to allow local people to be interested. They're going to say it's not really your history, right? So anyway, as we saw with the Zimbabwe excavations, so in 1927, they've got all these people involved, Western, Chinese archaeologists. Let's chuck a couple of English people in there and you've got a full set. You know, this is great. But what is key to this is that the way the artifacts are treated. Some of the archaeology goes to Sweden. Now this is key because if the archaeology hadn't gone to Sweden, this would all be classed as fiction because nothing would have survived what happened in 1941. What happened is that another tooth was found, so you've got 4 teeth. Now, this may not sound riveting, but this is riveting, by the way. 4 teeth of our human ancestors, and these teeth are very similar to the ones at Java. So they're from the same primate in brackets. Be very careful with the word primate. So a tooth is found, and that tooth itself is placed into a gold locket and placed on the watch chain of this Canadian. Now, it had to be a Canadian who would do something like that. But if he hadn't done that, that tooth and the other 3 teeth wouldn't have survived. So there's some good in all these things. So Black, the Canadian anatomist Black, published his results in the journal Nature, identifying his finds belonging to, he said, a new species and genus, which he named Sinanthropus pekinensis. Now, I think he was going along the lines of Anthropus, the Anthropus finds. Let's just remember Pithecanthropus of Java. So he was saying Sinanthropus pekinensis. Now, the sin bit is Chinese, means basically Chinese upright being. So in other words, this is basically the Java upright being, but it's been found in China. Cyan, sin. Anthropus pekinensis. But naturally, other experts were skeptical. They said, you know, all you've got is teeth, right? It's hardly the basis of a new species. And Black basically said, you know, I want more money from the Rockefeller Foundation to prove this. And then the find comes in. They find a lower mandible, a lower jaw with several teeth still in it, and skull fragments. This is key. This is really important. Now, alone, this doesn't this only tells us of another Homo erectus being. That's all it tells us so far. Black managed to secure funding in 1928 of £80,000. An excavation at the site under the supervision. Now, what's happening is that the work is now being supervised by Chinese archaeologists. A Yang Zugia, a Pei Enzo, and G Lapo, Lanpo. And then what's happened is that altogether now, by the end of the excavations in 1937, they had found the remains of up to 40 individual specimens of Homo erectus, and amounted to over 200 individual fossils. Now, when the excavation stopped in 1937 because of a Japanese invasion of mainland China, and the excavations at Zukodim resumed after the war, very much in the 1960s, 1970s. But then when the excavation resumed in the 1960s, they weren't finding what they had found before because the excavations had been very intense before. Now, this is the problem. This is something that I tell people. They say, why hasn't that site ever been excavated, and why hasn't that one been excavated? Well, we've got a hill fort that's been excavated, Hambledon Hill, and we've got Maiden Castle that's been excavated. So why do we need to excavate more hill forts? So if the results from Hambledon Hill are destroyed, then we can go to one of the other sites and excavate it. This is why we don't excavate all these sites, because in future generations things might change. So it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And excavations are being undertaken in the 60s, 70s, and in the modern day and age. So what we find is that the skull capacity isn't as great as ours. I think our skull capacity is something like 1,300 cc, and these are something like 1,140 cc, which is the cubic area of the brain. But that's sort of not really helping us in moving forward with this. So what we've got the upper and lower cave. The fossils were stored at the Union Medical College in Peking. Eyewitnesses state that they're there in 1941. Now, this is what doesn't make sense, and this is why we get really interesting, right? So imagine in front of you, the information is in front of you. You're watching Chinese academics, and they're at the Union Medical College in Peking. And in comes the left, the Japanese army in 1941. And these medical college experts are still there, right? They're still teaching. And then in Peking, there's an American base. You can't make this up. There's an American base, 1941 in Peking, but the base is operational. At that point, Japan hasn't. It's not the 7th of December 1941. They haven't. Nothing's really happened. And basically, at that point, the Americans are still friends with the Japanese. So anyway, one point I don't get with this is that the Japanese allow the Americans under their nose to put some of the most important prehistoric remains ever found in 2 crates on board an American US Marine vehicle. And then that heads out of Japanese territory into northern China, into the Zihado, to the port of Zihado, close to the Marine base at Camp Holcomb. From there, they were meant to be sent to the American Museum of Natural History in New York. And you're thinking, this doesn't make any sense. The Japanese are allowing this stuff to leave the country, and things don't add up. Anyway, there is a possibility that they didn't leave Camp Holcomb because of political wrangles. They didn't leave Camp Holcomb. It said, however, Other accounts say that they were placed onto a ship at Peking in November 1941. And as the ship is heading across the Pacific, it's torpedoed, and it goes down with all hands, and the fossils are lost. This was on a vessel known as the President Harrison. The ship never arrived, and the bones were lost forever. But we do have a story about that, which we will tell you after the break. Various attempts have been made to locate the fossils, but so far without success. But in 1971, an American financier put up £5,000 to actually find the missing skulls. And it's said that somebody had them. But the £500,000 couldn't be raised to actually purchase them. But that's another thing. Now, this is another thing. In July 2005, the 60th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, the Chinese government set up a committee to find the bones. Now, I find that very strange. And the reason why that's very strange is that Stalin, after the Second World War, within weeks, set up a commission to find the Amber Room. So the Russians are into this straight away, and it takes 60 years for the Chinese to find some of the most important finds in prehistory ever made. And that's not an exaggeration. Rumors about the fate of the bones range from their not being placed onto an American ship, but a Japanese ship, the Awa Maru, or that they were ground up for Chinese medicine. 4 of the teeth did survive. Now, this is why the teeth are so important. They survived in Uppsala University, and the one that was placed into a golden locket. Some opponents of the science evolution think that the fossils may have been a fabrication and that their disappearance was intentional, which I don't go with. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to finish what I'm reading in front of me. And I think this is the Java skull, because this can't be the Peking skull, because they were lost. So obviously the first time, just a bit of an overview, the first time we got Homo erectus identified was in Java. But now we've got examples at this site. Now, with the finds now and with the finds in the past, animal remains have been found, and evidence that these Homo erectus individuals were making fires, and they had tools and they were making tools. So the analysis of the remains of Peking man led to the claim that Chokodin and the Java fossils were examples of the same broad stage of evolution. And there's also another site known as Lantian man. So we've got another site, and this was discovered in 1964. So in other words, we've got these 3 localities, and the Lantian remains are actually later than the Java remains and the Peking remains. So yeah, Homo erectus are still about, and maybe they just evolved. But the main thing is that the Java and the Peking remains, it's almost as if it comes to a dead end. It, you know, what happened to the Homo erectus, we don't know, but maybe we do know because they evolved into modern humans. And this is the next bit, and this is rather interesting. So on the stage is this Franz Veidenreich, and the Franz Veidenreich is seen excavating. There he is there. Typical Chinese archaeologists around him. So Franz Veidenreich, he dies in 1948, but he leaves us a legacy. He considered, and I believe him. Oh, that's put my cards on the table, what I believe. Consider Peking man as a human ancestor, and specifically an ancestor of the Chinese people. And this is where it goes quite askew, as seen in his original multi-regional model of human evolution in 1946. Now, it's amazing that people would believe this guy because he's German. But it was by the 1950s, this was a widely accepted theory, multi-regional model of human evolution. We haven't got the Leakeys finding their Latolite footprints. It's interesting you mentioned footprints, Henry, but these date from many years ago. And then you've got the remains of Lucy. So this is before all that. And strangely enough, as soon, in other words, what we've got is this is how biased and bent history is, right? Veidenreich is saying that we've got evolution in Africa and we've got evolution in China and we've got evolution in other places before anything else is found in Africa, right? This is why we've got the balanced man, right? Balanced individual. And as soon as everybody starts finding stuff in Africa, right? Oh, forget the Chinese stuff. It's out of Africa. This is how biased history is. Chinese scholarly literature in the 1950s included the view was that Peking man in some ways resembled modern humans rather than modern Chinese, which is quite a strange position to take. Or is it me just being a Western thinking? People said that by the Chinese saying this, they're being ideological and chauvinistic. Well, hang on a minute. I can say the same about the Leakeys with Olduvai Gorge. They're ideological and chauvinistic by saying that we evolved from China only, that we evolved from Africa only. That's very chauvinistic. Oh, by the way, they're Western archaeologists, so they've got to be right. And then there's this other theory as well that these primitive straits must have evolved from the other way. Obviously, you know, we've got these Homo erectocines coming from Europe, and you know they're living in this area, and everything evolves from that, all that type of stuff. Anyway, during the 1980s and over the past couple of decades, the multi-regional model has been eclipsed by widespread acceptance of recent African origin out of Africa. Although a 1999 study perceived a continuity in skeletal remains, and a minority like myself view even attempted to derive modern humans from China rather than Africa. Since the 2010, the question has been reopened in terms of an archaic admix to the modern human lineage. So in other words, that's a very powerful one. So I'd go further and saying, look, what we need to do is look at out of Africa, out of China, out of India, out of wherever, and we've got an admix to a human lineage, and that's the one I go with, the admix. We're all evolved from different localities and it's all mixed together, cosmopolitan. That's the one I prefer. East Asians are now known to be partially descendant from Denisovians, which we've mentioned, which show morphological similarities both to certain younger East Asian fossils and to Chinese specimens of Homo erectus. So in other words, have we got out of China? Or have we got the multi-regional model? Have we got something else? So I am really actually quite knackered there. So anyone who wants to say anything, keep it very, very brief because I need a break. So anything you want to say, Jessica?
No.
Right. Anything you'd like to say, Henry?
No, we'll send you something. So I think it kind of... Don't worry.
You always seem to put my dates back another 1,000 years like you did last week. Well, actually, last week, right, you increased my date range by about 20,000 years. Thank you very much. Bill, anything, which is great. I like to be wrong in the wrong way. The wrong direction is always the right way to be wrong, right? It's like being with an older woman, more experienced than a younger woman, the best way to be. Anne, make it quick.
No.
Oh, right, that makes a change. What about you, Pat?
No, I'm fine.
What about you, Pam Atricia? Go on, Pam, give it to us. I don't think she wants to talk to us. I think she's still upset when I was really racist against Bulgarians. They still lost the.
No,
they still lost the football.
Just no. Yeah, I know.
No, it's
No,
a big
don't
debate.
have a break.
Shut up. Let Pam talk.
I said no. Go and have a break.
All right, then.
Have a break.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll be back soon. Thank you.
Okay.
Cheers.
See you soon.
All right, Bill. Bill hasn't. Oh, bloody! What a little baby. He's like a little child in a pram. Go on, Bill. Let's have it.
Well, just to end on a lighter note, Carl, I had to smile earlier when you showed that huge image of Homo erectus in China, and you referred to it as my state man.
Yeah.
Now, I have seen people, particularly at the top end of my valley, where I swear that Darwin's principle of evolution has gone into reverse, because some of them can't even pull a basic sentence together to make it coherent, and they grunt a lot. So maybe something is happening to change things as well.
well, actually, do you know what, Michelle? Actually, I'm going to tell you something off the recording, right? So that's what we're saying. So I'm gonna pause this a minute, right? So let's. So here we go. Part 2. So this is probably this lecture today is quite a strange one because it's more vocal, and I'm just using some of these things as a bit of a backdrop. So what I'd like to do before I do this last bit in front of me, I would like to, if I can get my computer on, I would like to mention this about the loss of the finds from our Peking site. So if I can, do you know what? I saw somebody's mucking with my computer in the break. It must be Anne. Do you know what? You can accuse people of doing all sorts of things in a virtual museum. Oh, and actually, Bill, right? You're never going to believe it, Bill. We're going to have virtual ghost walks as well inside the museum.
Sounds good. Now come on those.
Exactly. Mystery of the lost Peking man fossils. Do you know what I'm going to read this whole thing out? A new investigation of the famous fossils that went missing during World War II suggests that the bones may be buried beneath a parking lot in China. Now, this came out in March 28th, Smithsonian Museum in 2012. So that would be months before Richard III was found under the car park. It says, last December 2011, I described one of the long-standing mysteries in the history of human evolution, the missing Peking man fossils. Now a new lead has brought anthropologists to the fossil's possible location. The only problem is that the spot is covered by a parking lot. The Peking man fossils are a set of, as we know, over 200 Homo erectus fossils excavated from China's Chokadin cave site during the 1920s and 1930s. During World War II, Chinese authorities packed up the fossils to send them to the United States for safekeeping. The bones were supposed to be transported to a US Marine base and then shipped off. Instead, the fossils vanished and no one really knows what happened to them. They happen to be under a car park. So here we go. A break in the case came in April 2010. Paul Bowen, the son of former US Marine Richard Bowen, emailed paleoanthropologist Lee Streckelberger of the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. Now we got the blooming South Africans involved in it now as well. All we need is a good old Chilean archaeologist, and we've got a full set. Bowen claimed his father had dug up a box of bones while stationed in the port of Chi-Ho-Dao, formerly called Qingwangtou. Well, you know, you need to know this, guys. In 1947, in other words, northern China on the coast. Now, 1947 was the cultural sort of revolution war between nationalist stroke communist China and communist China. In other words, these were basically people with sort of communist ideology, but completely from two different spectrums. In his email, the younger Bowen described what his father told him. So here we go. Can I do a Yankee accent? Day after day, the war there was getting hotter and closer. Idaho, south of us, was mostly overrun. The city of Chiwangtou was now under siege by the communist 8th Route Army, with nationalists' gunboats shelling them over our camp. Fiddle-dee. One day, a group of them asked us to surrender, saying that they had 250 men and a dromedary. To prove the point, that night thousands of fires were lit by them on the adjacent hills and high ground. Well, I have no idea how they managed to fit 250,000 people on the hill alone. It looked like Christmas time. From that time on, we started digging foxholes at night and napping during the day. I had a .30 caliber machine gun, and our lieutenant would, from time to time, fiddly-dee, change our crossfire. In this nightly digging process, we dug a lot of holes. In one of them, we found a box that was full of bones. I was so frightened. This was at night, and it gave us such a scare. And we filled in that hole and never went back to see the bones ever again. Shortly after this, we evacuated the area, went back to Peking, which is somewhere in China, you know what it's like, and then back to the United States of good old US of A. And the 1st Marine Division colors were sent back. Oh my God, that was hard work. I got to ask, I should ask Pat if that was a good accent, actually. So basically, this is back to 2010. Streckelberger from South Africa and with Bowen's help, sort of went to China to investigate. And obviously, the protocol in China is that you've got to have Chinese archaeologists working with you, and so right too. So Wu Li and Yingying Wu, both of China's Institute for Vertebrate and Paleontological and Paleoanthropological Institute in Beijing. I don't know how the hell they managed to say this. Streckelberger went to Xinghadao in November 2010 to locate the site of the US Marine base where Bowen was stationed. The area is now an industrial hub with numerous warehouses. The most likely site where Bowen found the bones, which the team located from Bowen's description where the base was, and with help from a local historian, is now a large parking lot. So there you go. This was reported in the National Geographic. Streckelberger and his colleagues did not excavate the area because they couldn't, because it was a car park. But if the bones were buried there, and if they survived the parking lot's construction with the movements of large amounts of soil and all the rest of it, researchers may find them one day. The area is expected to undergo a large redevelopment sometime soon. And Streckelberger and his colleagues say asked local officials to inform them to monitor the site in case the bones turn up. Oh God, that was hard work. In future, you know what? I prefer to do good old Confederate Southern accents instead of that. Anyway, so back to the lecture. So one thing I was saying, obviously, about the way the Chinese actually show off their wonderful archaeology. Zuccoden. And what you do see is, if you ever look at Chinese archaeological sites, recent ones, they put great glass hangers above them and there's light flowing into them, and you can wonder sort of, wow, it's great. So there you go. Obviously, lots of these skulls are reconstructed. Obviously, you know, lots of the 40 sets of the individuals from casts. There is our friend Veidenreich. And I think it's, to me, it's rather interesting to look at a German archaeologist not only working at a site like this with an open mind, that's really important, with an open mind, with a different mind than those minds that have been altered in Germany by this look for this superior race. And it's also important that in 1946, when his work comes out, it's actually taken seriously. And he's working with the Chinese as well. So it's all good stuff. I like it. Do you know what? I wonder where Veidenreich went, because he wouldn't have gone back to Germany, would he? So he probably stayed around that neck of the woods. So again, do you know what? You're looking at this face, and you know, I used to love watching Monkey. I don't know if you ever saw that program, that weird series in the 1980s from Japan. It was Monkey, and there was Titicaca, and there was Pigsy, and there was Fishman, and there was Monkey, and this is what he looked like. And it was looking at sort of this journey about these three people who who protected this priest on a horse, who turned out to be a woman but was dressed up as a man. Anyway, long story, it was great. And this is what this reminds me of. Do you know, nobody ever remembers these films from the 80s or programs. Do you know what I used to love doing is coming home from school on a Wednesday and watching Tarzan and the Apes. Anyway, discoveries in Zuccotin, discoveries then and now in the caves, tell us that these people were quite capable of making fires back all those hundreds of thousands of years ago. So we've got the ash evidence, we've got bone evidence, not only, well, we've got bone evidence now, you know, this is what they're finding, but we've got bone evidence of animals, all different types of animals. And one thing that must be said is that climate, obviously, climate had an effect on animals and human populations, but with temperatures going up and down this way, that way, and all the rest of it, there are people living within this landscape of the same genetic pool for 450, some say 350,000 years. That's how long they're living there. And if we think about climate changes in the last 100 years, you know, this is climate changes over hundreds of thousands of years. So we've got nothing on them. So by understanding the real backdrop and the background, we can understand more about these people than just the bones. These ain't just a load of bones that are our evolutionary ancestors. And one thing I should really say today, to stop any confusion, it is accepted that, well, whether this is going to change, that Homo erectus is directly on our family tree. So whether the Homo erectus evolved into us, or Homo erectusines actually remained with their own genetic group, but eventually it all comes back together in where we are today. So these people live in regards to the caves and out into the valleys. Obviously, most of the evidence is going to be in the caves because the valley landscapes have changed extensively due to agriculture and glaciation and so on. But we know their association with these caves, whatever they were doing with them, there would have been hyenas and wolves, and there would have been bears and even animals that we don't know existed yet. And these would have lived in the caves against and alongside the humans. And one thing that must be said is this: in archaeology, this is a really important point, and I can't stress this anymore. When archaeologists find bones on an archaeological site, they always make an association with the bones and the human, i.e., you know, this is what we ate. Well, actually, the sheep may have wandered on site and just died. Do you know what I mean? So the archaeologists have been very careful with that. So they said, right, we've got all these bones in the cave with the human bones, but what is the relationship between these animal bones and the human bones? And in lots of cases, the animal bones have been introduced by animals themselves. They, you know, a bear is dragging something into the cave and eating it, or a bear is dying in the cave, or a wolf is in the cave and whatever. And little rodents and so on. So what they've had to do is look at these bones. Only a small number of these bones show signs that they've been, that the animal's been butchered or they're eating off the bone. But we do have evidence that they're roasting bone as well. So they get a chunk of meat, check it on the fire. There's no tin foil back then, Bill, so they can't put it in tin foil. So they're putting it on the fire, and obviously it's roasted off the bone. Nice. But you're not allowed to do that now, are you? Anyway, the composition of the animal bones from the cave layer shows a massive shift in climate over the period of time, and naturally that goes without saying. It would do. We don't have radiocarbon dating to help us with this time period. We're looking at layers and reading stratigraphy, and also potassium argon dating. We're looking at thermoluminescence dating and uranium series dating. And the way uranium series dating, if you've got some uranium atoms in existence in a sealed layer, a full uranium set of atoms has X quality, and after half the life of the uranium atoms, it's now a half-life uranium atom. So you're able to read it there from the half-life of the uranium atoms. And then you might have a quarter of the life of the uranium atoms, and basically not much of a uranium atom, and that you're able to look, the less and less of the original uranium atoms that were actually on this site, the older the layers at the site are. I should have said that in the first place because it made more sense when I just did the last bit. So the human fossils at this wonderful site of Peking tell us of a complex landscape, and this is where it is today underneath this. Now, you could be excused for what I may have done last week, but I didn't mean to, and if I did, I apologize. I almost put all the Aboriginal fossils into one period, but I actually, if I was seen to do that, I didn't mean to do it. What I was trying to say is that, you know, you've got Aboriginal fossils from a wide range of time in Australia. And with this as well, over that period of time, say we're talking about a period of 350 or 450,000 years. If we look at 450,000 years, you've got one set of human remains representing every 10,000 years. I've just got to open the door a minute because the witch has just arrived. Hang on. Hello, my beautiful, wonderful witch. I'm still teaching. Leave that there, and Merlin wants to give you a cuddle. Give me a kiss. I'm still teaching. They don't believe you. They don't believe me. I call you evil, red-headed witch. Are we still back with it, folks? Yeah, good. So anyway, so back to what I said. You know, we've got one set of Homo erectus remains, a skull or whatever's representative of that body, and the other thing is we don't have any full remains. We have bits of individual remains which represent the 40 individuals, and more human remains have been found since. So I don't know how many have been found in this locality altogether, but you've got to see these Homo erectus over this long period of time, and they've remained the same type of hominid. And I think I probably need to explore something briefly here. You remain the same type of hominid because you're isolated, right? And that's all you are, you know, Homo erectus, and there's no evidence of any other hominids here, which is weird. And where other sites later on, you do get lots of hominids represented, and even in the Olivai Gorge in Africa. And you just think that the Homo erecting body composition was probably adequate for what they needed. This is why, where's this image? This is why an image like this is why these types of hominids didn't evolve massively over that period of time. But these are all sort of common ancestors of human beings, and whatever way you want to look at it, transitional fossils, direct development, so on. So the interesting thing is that this morphs into the overall cycle. And another thing to say, whether this agrees or disagrees with me, some of the features of Homo erectus in China are carried forward through these transitional fossils into the modern Asian population. And the presence of these features has been used by East Asian physical anthropologists to argue for the genetic continuance and local evolution of modern humans. So that multi-regional pattern that we're evolving in different areas, and all those characteristics are moving in, and you get unique Mongoloid features, unique Japanese features, Indian features, Inuit features. All these things are the way humanity has gone in different directions. And the other thing as well is, if anyone argues that we're just all developed from out of Africa, you can then argue that we are all different, but we're all hominids. And in fact, the argument out of Africa shoots itself in the foot because of the different types of hominids that are around on the planet today, the way everything's evolved. It's sort of challenged in a way by modern biologists, molecular biologists, who assert, however, our modern species evolved in Africa and only Africa, or maybe with a little bit of a divergence in Southwest Asia, between 200 and 120,000 years ago, and that this new population then spread out through the world, replacing older Homo erectus populations. How did they replace them? Did they push them all into the sea? Do you know, this is the problem. The argument that we all come out of Africa just doesn't make sense. You know, it would mean, this is the point, if you're going to have one evolution and you've got lots of hominids on the planet and it all evolved from one type of hominid, you have to annihilate every single other hominid on Earth. And that is simply not possible. So local evolution and this continuance from Homo erectus in regional populations is not allowed by this view, once termed the Eve hypothesis. So all these different ideas are contradictory, and the two contradictory interpretations of the fossil and genetic data have still not been resolved, and debate between specialists continues over the Eastern and Western material for even this day. I think there is a danger by me polarizing the debate today and saying it's one way or another. I've given you the evidence to make up your own mind. Again, these are casts, and that is an original, but I think this is the. It says the Peking man skull fragments. We don't have that level of fragments, so or is this a more recent one found? But again, that's giving you an idea of our Homo erectusines, one more or less complete. And obviously, the way they're protecting the archaeology there, they've got this big sort of armadillo over it, and it's protecting. It's allowing moisture in there to sort of circulate, but it's protected against the natural elements. And instead of putting labels everywhere, you've got this sort of rays on the wall. And again, inside the armadillo, where modern plants are growing and all the rest of it, it's allowed to be. And this sort of wonderful armadillo where they've got on this little plan here says preserved trees there, entrances into the upper cave and the lower cave, the area where they've excavated, and areas in front of the cave where they've excavated as well. And finally, there it is from above again, excavations in the 60s. Interesting that they're actually wearing face masks in the 60s. They knew what was coming. And there's our friend, there's Veidenreich again. And if we go back to the upper cave as well. So what I'm going to say is we're going to call that a day now. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Go on, Bill. You keep the questions limited because Jessica's got to go off and buy a McDonald's.
Sometimes you just can't keep questions limited, Carl. You just can't on this subject. It's such an intricate one.
Keep it to 3.
Dating of these early hominid remains, like skulls, you mentioned that radiocarbon dating can't help. You mentioned uranium series dating of actual clay deposits or stone deposits. So could not the material in which these remains are found help to give some idea of a date using that technique or not? That's one question.
No, I think that's I think the answer is yes. So we've got a long way to go. So that's yes.
Right. Okay. The other question is the way the early hominids are identified and these names put on them. One of the basic facts to look at are the shape and the size of the skull, and how the skull gets bigger with evolution, indicating that the brain is developing into what is now modern man, Homo sapiens, etc. Is it possible, this is too simplistic, I think, is it possible to get a range of these different skulls where the shape and the size are clearly different, and make some sort of straight line law, especially using uranium series dating, as I just mentioned, give some idea of some equation or straight line law we could actually put to these to give a time scale, as crude as it may be.
Yeah, that is possible, but again, we don't have the full collection of these bones. That is the downside, Bill. That is the massive downside. The other thing as well is there's a problem with what you've just said. This is what some of those German scientists were doing from the 1920s onwards. There's a very famous German sort of collector of heads, who's in America. He's got a huge collection. I can't remember his name, but it's just that thing, because you've got a bigger skull capacity, it means that you're more intelligent than anybody else, which is wrong, because as we know, you know, our brains themselves, we only use about 10% of our brain. But obviously, naturally, with protein and all the rest of it, our brain is going to grow bigger. But there is also argued that there are bits of our brain that we may have used in the past that we don't use anymore. So therefore, those bits of the brain are surplus to requirement. People who have lobotomies have bits of their brain removed, and they're able to function quite normally with no changes. So yeah, there's lots of questions there, Bill, and I think yes, brain capacity builds, but then again, is it a sign that you're more intelligent? And the answer is no.
What about age? How accurate are the estimates of how old these hominids are?
Well, I can give you a quick, straight answer. 750,000 to 300 to 250,000 years ago. That's not that accurate, is it? No. 14th of October 1066 is accurate. Okay. You know, the 6th of April, 1746, the Battle of Culloden's accurate, but the others, and you know, that isn't. You know, Henry.
Really interesting. I think the only comment I was going to make was, I think the theory that everything came from one point in nature doesn't normally stack up, because if you actually have that whole population wiped out, you never exist. So doesn't it actually make sense that you'd have a number of strands across the continents that would actually be forming at the same time?
Yes, and that's basically the that's known as determinism. You've got diffusion. Diffusionism is basically out of Africa. We've got all pyramids that evolve in Africa, right? That's what they used to think. They used to think that you look at a pyramid in Central America and you look at a pyramid somewhere else, and it's almost as if everything comes out of Africa. But these pyramids are being built at different times, at different levels at the same time, because our mind is determining that direction. That's what we're going to do. And there's no reason why you can't have a multi-regional model. And the other thing as well is, if I look up the following, Lemuria. Basically, it's the study of monkey remains in different parts of the earth. Anyway, look that one up, Lemuria, and you'll work out what I'm talking about. Right, so is that you done, Henry and Bill?
Yeah, that's fine.
What about you, Jessica, in the middle?
Well, it was really good. Never really looked into something like that in great detail, so it was good to learn something new.
Good, thank you very much. And I'll see you tonight, Jessica and Billis, and I think Pam does tonight as well. What about you, Patricia?
Oh, all's well. Thank you very much. Appreciated it.
Okay, and if anyone watches the video that I made last night on Penrhys Mountain of the remains of the monastery, the llama is actually called Herbie. Anne, anything you would like to say?
I've always felt that it's been a regional thing, you know, regional from different areas evolve from different, well, perhaps the same species, but you know, you've only got to look at, if they say we come from apes, don't they, or monkeys? So
if you're a Jehovah's Witness, no, that's
you've
not
only
right.
got to look at the variety of, you know, monkeys and apes, and they're not just in Africa; they're all over the world. So yeah, right. So there's going to be different bone structures and things like that, you know. But I did have a quiz. I did a quiz once, and you had to put your picture, and they would tell you what kind of ethnicity you were.
Oh God.
And it told me that I was Chinese.
Right, okay, we'll leave that one, Anne. Right, who's left? Anyway, thanks for that, Anne. Christ almighty. I thought, let's not go over any further on that, Anne. Right, okay, Pam.
No, I'm fine tonight, and thank you very much.
Oh, okay, right, okay, then if nobody's got anything else to say, we know what we're doing next week. And then in the new year, you'll be building your own avatars to wander around the museum. It's quite simple. So if nobody's got anything else to say, or they want a quick chat afterwards, they can. But if not, I'm gonna go upstairs and I'm gonna lie down on the bed, completely stark naked, and think about you lot.
Okay, thanks, Carl.
Don't think too hard.
Okay, Henry, thanks for the stuff you sent me. So Pat,
Yeah.
Henry, Pam, Jessica, Bill, we'll see you all next week. And
All have a good time in lockdown.
we will. Hey, that's in Scotland, isn't it? Lockdown.
Zero whiskey.
Hey, hang on, mate. Can I tell you a joke? I've missed this joke out with everybody else, right? I'll tell it next week. Right? I will tell you this now, right? A guy goes into a pub, right? He says to the guy beyond the bar, "My island has got songs about it," and the guy beyond the bar says, "Well, my island's got loads of songs about it." The guy beyond the bar says, "I actually come from the Isle of Skye. There's the Sky Boat song." And the other guy, so the guy beyond the bar, he said, which island you come from? And the guy said, "I come from Dunoon." And the guy beyond the bar, he said, "Oh," he said, "that's not an island." And he said, "Yeah, at least we got songs about us." And he said, "Oh God, oh Christ, hang on,
You've lost it.
There's a joke. Hang on. Let's go. Let's remember. You can't go. It's hang on. I've lost what the bloody punchline is. Shit.
Save it for next week.
Do you know what? I'm gonna save it for next week. Do you know what? I wonder what comedians would do on a stage. They go through this whole fucking repertoire, right? And they've forgotten what the bloody punchline was.
It's called rehearsal.
I have rehearsed it 3 times today. Nobody's laughed, but I thought it was funny.
Anyway, I sent you a couple of bits there to entertain you.
The Owen Glendower bit. Well, you proved one of the points with Owen Glendower. He was not heard of after. If you look at Owen Glendower, right, look at all the reports about Owen Glendower after about 1406, and you'll probably come to a blank.
Yeah. So
that's the point. Anyway, I will
let you go.
And I will wake myself up by smelling my sock. Right. Anyway, Henry, thanks for joining us. Thanks for the stuff, and I will see you next week. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Anyway, thanks for that. Oh God, it's knackering doing the last lecture of the week, but it's a very interesting series of lectures, and as I'm calling them, seminars.